Shedeur Sanders shined in his preseason debut and proved once again that he should be the opening day starter for the Cleveland Browns. We'll break it down on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, joined today by Locked On NFL expert, The Legacy, Louis DiBiase. On today's show, we are going to break down preseason week one. So much to talk about, especially with the rookies and the quarterbacks. We'll talk about J.J. McCarthy checking some boxes for Minnesota. We'll talk about Jaxson Dart throwing darts in his good debut, and we'll start with Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, who both were impressive in their starts. Before we get into it, though, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen and being an everydayer here with us at the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Louis, it was a great debut from Shedeur Sanders for the Cleveland Browns, and my guy Spencer from Locked On Browns broke it down.
As expected, Shedeur Sanders delivered in his preseason Browns debut, if you will, as I figured he would. Because here's the thing. It didn't matter what nationally was being said. It didn't matter that people were trying to spin this web that he was being set up for failure by the Browns because he hadn't taken reps with the first team. Anybody who's a true Shedeur Sanders fan knows that wasn't going to matter to him. It didn't matter what reps he took. It didn't matter if he was with the first team, second team, third team, fourth team. When he goes out, he's a gamer. I talked about this on the podcast this week. He is a gamer. And when he went out there on the field, when the lights are the brightest, when he's in between those lines, he just balls. And I think we saw a lot of that in this performance against the Panthers on Friday night. 14-23.
He was good in the game. I mean, he put it up the numbers. He led them on scoring drives. It didn't start great for him. There were a couple of missed throws early, and it wasn't all perfect. And at the end of the day, it's just preseason. That's what all of the haters are going to scream from the mountaintops. But I think he looked much better than a number 4 quarterback on the depth chart, and I think it's no surprise that the guy who looked like he might be the second or third at best quarterback in the draft class also looked like the second or third best quarterback in the draft class over the weekend. So it may just be preseason, but I think it just reaffirmed that Sanders has more talent than where his draft slot is, and he deserves a better shot than maybe what he's necessarily getting in the crowded quarterback room of the Browns right now. But if they're smart, he's a guy who can just energize their franchise, and he gives them way more upside than anything else that they have going.
Yeah, and a lot of people are focusing on this game showing that Sanders should be higher in the Browns' depth chart. He should be having a better chance in this quarterback battle. But my biggest takeaway from this performance is what you were just talking about, that this guy had no business being a fifth-round pick. And look, I wasn't somebody that loved Shedeur Sanders. I think he is limited in a lot of ways. I was a much bigger fan of Cam Ward when people were discussing who is QB1. But he clearly is not a fifth-round pick, and that game showed me, like, oh yeah, I think the NFL colluded against this kid. Completely. He had no business being this late of a draft pick, and I think the only reason he was is probably because of his last name and his mentality on top of his dad's, but you could just see how much farther along he is than a lot of rookies from a processing standpoint, accuracy, ball placement, like some of those layer throws and how he stands in and can deliver passes in the face of pressure, which he had to do a lot at Colorado with those bad offensive lines. So for me, it just affirmed that not only should he should be ahead of Dylan Gabriel and Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett, but it to me shows like the NFL kind of pushed this. And I think it kind of shows like the NFL is kind of caught with some collusion this offseason too with the guaranteed contracts. And I know that was my biggest take watching. It was hard to not root for him considering the situation.
Yeah, I think clearly whether it was, we want to devalue his skills or whether it was we want to kind of, teach him a lesson and this and that, whatever the purpose for the collective move that happened was, it does seem like there was something that happened collectively because there's no way this guy is not good enough to go higher than where he got drafted.
And I don't think he was a first round. Like, I don't believe it should have been a close conversation between Cam Ward and Shedeur. Like, there are people that put Sanders as a top 4 pick, like mocked to the New York Giants or the Cleveland Browns earlier. But again, the 5th round, like there is a huge middle ground with what the reality was and where his projection was. I think he's a end of day 1, probably early day 2 selection. I even like the mobility that I saw from him. That was one of my things is he doesn't escape pressure as well. He doesn't make plays outside of structure as well as a Cam Ward. But I actually thought he did really well in that way against Carolina in his debut for the Browns. So I don't know. I think that was a huge win, and I'm with you. Cleveland there is no incentive, no upside to start anybody else except for Shedeur. If he's the guy, perfect. If not, you have 2 first-round picks to go get your next guy. Everybody knows Dylan Gabriel's not going to be the person. It's not going to be Joe Flacco, and in my opinion, it's not going to be Kenny Pickett. So I think it's a slam dunk about who should be the starter.
Yeah, it makes the most sense for the Browns, and as I talked about on Friday's show, they're like falling backwards into something good for them is basically what's happening.
It's very Cleveland Browns of them, I feel like.
Right. The football gods are trying to drag the Cleveland Browns kicking and screaming to something good.
And they're like, no, he's the 4th quarterback. They're like, would you please we're giving you this, Cleveland. Stop being Cleveland for a second.
Yes. Just for one moment, just stop. But I thought it was impressive. And again, it may be preseason. He's not playing against starters, all the things the haters want to say. But the things that we thought he could do well, he was able to do, and he looked comfortable. He looked poised. He looked like he belonged. And that's something that's not really a surprise to us based on what we're saying. But someone else who looked like they belong out there was Cam Ward. And it was a tough start, obviously. Cam Ward I'm covering on a day-to-day basis. Don't want to have the home cooking biases. It wasn't all perfect. Ward's first 2 passes, I thought, were not great plays for him. There was an almost interception in there, trying to take a whole shot on cover 2, but leads a 65-yard touchdown drive, comes back from 1st and 20, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 6 in the red zone, and drives the team all the way down with completions to get them first downs on all of those situations. I thought Ward wasn't perfect, but he handled adversity well, and he's another guy who, my biggest takeaway, like with Shedeur Sanders, is he looked like a guy who belonged. He looked like a guy who is ready to be a starter week 1 in the NFL.
Yeah, I think you saw the good and the bad of Cam Ward last night,
Yes.
and I'm very fascinated by Ward as a prospect, so I was watching every snap. And for me, that near interception shows, okay, he might have to rein it in at times, but he is a gunslinger by a mentality perspective. And so You saw the bad of that yesterday, but you also saw the good. 80% of his completions gained 10-plus yards, which was second highest of any quarterback this week. 63% of his attempts were for 10-plus air yards. And I thought you saw, again, those 3rd and long conversions you were talking about. That shows what Cam Ward can do. I really do believe he can carry maybe a team that has less talent than other teams across the league. So, yeah, again, he can't make those mistakes. He's got to know when to pick and choose his spots. That's when a lot of these, like the Jameis Winstons and Carson Wentz of the world, those top 2 picks never learned how to find that balance, and some did. I think Cam Ward, he'll learn that as he goes, because you did kind of see the high variance of that kind of player yesterday. But he's a fun watch, man, and I think from a fantasy perspective, Calvin Ridley, I think, is going to catch a lot of balls this year. I mean, those two, you could see the chemistry right away.
Oh, yeah. First 3 completions are to Calvin Ridley for 50 yards. They've been connecting consistently throughout training camp and some of the joint practices. And you go back a year ago with Will Levis, that was like a big talking point in Tennessee Titans preseason conversation, is that Levis and Ridley can't get on the same page. Mm-hmm. You had Mason Rudolph and Will Levis out there. The Titans maybe had the worst quarterback play of any team in the NFL last year, and Ridley still went for 1,000 yards. So if you're thinking about fantasy football, which is right around the corner, well, Calvin Ridley is a good player to be thinking about. But good debuts from Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, but there are more rookie quarterbacks to discuss. But fantasy football might have something to say about that. Today's episode is brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy Football. Look, folks, it's the best time of the year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and Legacy Louie are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I've used Yahoo Fantasy for years. They've been the best in the business for quite some time. They've really fine-tuned the fantasy experience, and to celebrate their 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped the Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season right around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're into the classics, you could still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. All right, Louis, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about two rookie quarterbacks that stood out over the weekend in Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, but now want to talk a little bit more about rookie quarterbacks and go to Jaxson Dart, who had a very good debut for the New York Giants, and the GOAT, the legend, Patricia Traina from Locked On Giants, broke down the day.
For the first time in the Brian Daboll era, the New York Giants topped the 30-point mark in the preseason, New York besting the Buffalo Bills 34-25 in the team's preseason opener. The Giants, who, as was thought to be the case, played their healthy starters in this game, got scoring drives from all four of their quarterbacks, three of them being touchdown drives. Starter Russell Wilson, the only one of the quarterbacks not to lead a touchdown drive, did manage a solid opening drive, running 12 plays, and the drive resulting in the first of three Graham Gano field goals of the day that went for 50-plus yards. Rookie Jaxson Dart made his NFL debut with a very solid showing, finishing 12 of 19 for 154 yards, a team best 8.1 yards per pass attempt, and one touchdown. Dart also added 24 rushing yards on 3 carries, the rushing yardage total being a team best this week. Want more to like about the game? The offensive lines were solid, allowing 0 sacks and just 10 pressures all game long. And the new and improved defense managed 18 total pressures against the Bills, while the run defense held Buffalo to just 58 yards on the ground on 15 carries. There's still work, though, that needs to be done. Of the Giants' 10 penalties in this game, 4 were of the pre-snap variety. The Giants, who haven't done full-fledged tackling this summer, also had 12 missed tackles, according to preliminary numbers from Pro Football Focus. But overall, there was a lot to like from the Giants' preseason opener as New York faces a critical season ahead.
I mean, Jaxson Dart showed a lot. I mean, the Giants overall, we're going to get into more than just Jaxson Dart with the Giants, but Dart made some good deep throws down the left sideline to Jordan Humphries, showed good mobility as well, which is something that he had on display. If Brian Daboll has worked with good young quarterbacks before, can get him on track, he could maybe play a little bit more this season than what I was expecting, thinking maybe it might be a redshirt year for him.
I honestly wouldn't waste time, and I would start Jaxson Dart. I was there in person, and not to overreact, because I thought Russell Wilson, again, without Malik Neighbors playing in this game, looked solid, leading them on that first field goal drive, as Patricia alluded to. Jameis Winston had a very Jameis Winston performance, which is why I went to the game. I went there for that specific reason.
Let's go.
But Jaxson Dart was the big takeaway, and I just think, again, he's going to take some time to fully develop, but Brian Daboll's proven with Josh Allen in Buffalo, I think even with Daniel Jones winning a playoff game, that he can help elevate and make things easier for quarterbacks, even when they aren't a finished product, and they can learn on the field. And with Dart's mobility, with that deep ball, I think it'll be enough where he can be your starter right off the bat. I don't think it will be too much for him. I think something I loved from his game at Ole Miss that I saw yesterday was his pocket movement under pressure is really impressive. And I thought there were a number of plays yesterday where he stepped up, climbed the ladder as things were, kind of collapsing on him from the outsides, and he made plays. So I know they have a lot of proven, experienced quarterbacks in that QB room, so Dart doesn't have to play right away, but I just don't see the incentive of not starting him. I think he'd be ready, and Daboll's the kind of guy that can make it easier for a quarterback and not put too much on his plate.
Yeah, I do think that they're smart to give him some time, because the things that he needs to improve on are probably the mental side of things, especially coming out of Ole Miss, where their scheme isn't super translatable, but
That's
what
fair.
he's asked to do on a daily basis in the NFL. So I can't say that they should just go to him right away, but I think a couple of weeks ago, if you had asked me what they should do with him, I would say that just give him the redshirt year, go with Winston, go with Wilson, but I don't think I feel that strongly that way now. You know what I mean? I think you're onto something there, that he may be a little bit more ready than we expect, and I think seeing him earlier than what I expected should be on the table now, because he did look pretty solid. And again, you preseason caveats, all the haters all the time always want to say this and that, but I really do think that he was more impressive than what I was expecting, at least, and maybe he should be able to get on the field, because I don't think that the Giants are going to really be a playoff contender or anything like that. So if they're not contending for the playoffs by November, why not throw Jaxson Dart out there and get a head start on next year?
And that is why I would start Jaxson Dart, because I think you're totally right. A redshirt year, like a Jordan Love redshirt year, in front of behind an Aaron Rodgers who's making the playoffs for that team, that could really help. But I think we all know Jaxson Dart is going to play at some point this year. The Giants are not good enough for Russell Wilson to carry them to the playoffs, so you know Dart's going to play at some point. I just hear this strategy all the time being discussed, and it always ends by like week 4, week 5, and I just don't think that extra month of seasoning is really going to help. So why waste time and why not just give him the whole year to grow? If I truly believed Russell Wilson would play all 17 games, I would be like, yeah, I agree with you, but I just think it's going to happen no matter what. So maybe they don't think that way right now, but why waste time? I think the majority of these experiments or these redshirt seasons, they never come to fruition, right? I mean, the first quarter of the year, I just feel like they're always in there.
Yeah, I feel like they may be delaying the inevitable a little bit, but the problem is if you're Brian Dable, you don't believe that. You think that
you can't think that way before the season starts, sure.
Right, exactly. So it makes sense that they don't feel that way internally, but it also makes sense for you to look at it and say, why not? Mm-hmm. You know, eventually we're going to get there. Why not get there right now? So that makes sense. But someone who is ready right now and is going to play not only one side of the ball right now, but both sides of the ball right now is Travis Hunter. He debuted, and my guy, the barber, Tony Wiggins from Locked On Jags, has been very, very pleased with what he's seen from Hunter so far.
He is just going to catch anything that gets in his vicinity on offense, and he is going to instinctively play like a wide receiver when he's playing corner on defense. He's going to be where he's supposed to be, but once that ball in the air, Travis Hunter is going to go get it. So while it looks different than I imagined, because I didn't have anything to even compare this to with someone playing this much at this level, I'm happy with what I see, man. I'm happy with his progress, his results. And there's something to be said about his confidence level. And I think that's super, super, super important.
Well, he looked super confident out there in the preseason game. He made an impact, had a couple of catches, played on defense. He did everything. But let me just say this. And I know it's going to come off as some haterade, and I know if Tony was here right now, he would say that it's a little bit of haterade.
Cover that Titans flag behind you.
I know. Of course it's me. But I saw a guy who ran a route too short on a 3rd down and set his team up with a 4th down instead of a 1st down conversion because he ran his route a little too short. I saw a guy who dove in on defense and tried to make a shoestring tackle and missed a tackle and let a guy get outside of him. So none of these rookies were absolutely perfect, no doubt about it, and Travis Hunter among them. But, everybody's freaking out about Travis Hunter right now and him, and I get it. He's very exciting, but he's a rookie too. So he's going to – and playing both sides and trying to play that much, everybody who's been in the NFL is saying it's going to be super difficult for a reason. So I'm just saying – I don't know if he's going to come in right away and be as good as he was in college. I think he's going to be a really good player, but it's going to take some time for them to figure out what's best for him.
I do believe he can do it long-term in the future where he's both a full-time corner and receiver, but I would agree that right now that probably isn't the best course of action. And for right now, what helps the Jaguars more in 2025? Him playing receiver or corner full-time? I think it still is receiver. I was going back and forth with that throughout the entire draft process. Is he a corner? Is he a receiver? I think eventually the answer will be both, but for now, I think him playing receiver and helping Trevor Lawrence bounce back is what's most important. And you're right. I think even though Hunter, can do this from the jump more than most prospects would be able to, I think it'll be smarter to have him commit to one position full-time and still play the other one in a smaller role, and I think that should be receiver. I think it'll just help your franchise quarterback more right now, so I am fascinated to see what they do, and it sounds like they're going to play him on both sides, but I do think there will be more of a full-time on one side setup with the other one being part-time. I just can't imagine he's playing every single down right from the jump. I don't know. It'd be awesome if he did, but we'll see.
Even 75% of the snaps on both sides of the ball would still be a lot. And I saw, I forget exactly where I saw this, but I think the best argument against it for Travis Hunter is not the game-to-game stamina and how tired you're going to be in the 4th quarter because you've been playing. It's the career longevity. You might be able to play that way, but you're not going to be able to play that way for 15 years. And
it's
have
like a running back getting,
career.
400 touches a year. Like it's not going to hold up.
Thing. Yeah. Maybe if he personally has the physical stamina to do it game to game, great. But the long-term wear on him from doing that, having to tackle Derrick Henry and then get smashed on a slant by a safety coming downhill, like that's just a lot of wear and tear for a guy to deal with. But
and he's not a big guy either, right?
No, he's not. He's very slender. You know what I mean? Which works in the NFL, but can it work with that sort of workload? These are the questions that will have to be answered. But if he's the unicorn he looks like he is, he may just break the mold, and some guys do that from time to time. But J.J. McCarthy is another guy who had to deal with some injuries. He's coming back now, and it sounds like he checked all the boxes in his opening debut with the Minnesota Vikings. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. We've all been there. You're logging on early. You're waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Game Time comes in. Game Time makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as you get closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. That's why I buy all my tickets on Game Time. They have the best features in the industry, a panoramic view from your seat, no hidden fees on your price, the Game Time guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets for concerts, for shows, not just sports, of course, with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, Louis, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about the quarterbacks and their debuts with Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, Jaxson Dart. Talked about Travis Hunter. Should have spent more time talking about Abdul Carter. If I'm honest, Carter was absolutely ridiculous, fantastic. He looks like he's going to be as advertised early on. But do want to mention some guys who aren't rookies, because there are some other quarterbacks in the NFL who we need to keep our eye on, and we start with J.J. McCarthy from the Minnesota Vikings. First, do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen. For your second listen, check out Locked On Bets. Look, folks, the NFL season is right around the corner, and our betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have you covered. They have can't-miss football futures, plus they still have their daily MLB locks. Make sure that you find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. But my guy, the brain, Luke Braun, talked about J.J. McCarthy's debut with the Minnesota Vikings.
McCarthy. Pretty good. It's nice. There's your take home. Yeah, pretty good. Did pretty good. Wasn't perfect, but pretty good. Here's some things that I liked. The timing was really nice. I think all the balls got out when they were supposed to. And they went to the guy that they were supposed to go to. But the timing to me looked really nice. The ball was out. The pressures that happened didn't come super, super late in the down like they did with, say, Brett Rippon, who had a pretty awful game. And that timing, being able to kind of keep up with the speed of the game was one of the things I was really watching for. I sort of expected him to be able to suss out what's going on pre-snap or make the proper reads, because he's been taking basically nothing but mental reps for a whole year. It was the physical part. It was the sort of actual timing and, bullets flying, responding to pressure, the real life tactile you're in an actual wartime situation stuff that I thought was going to be a bit of a struggle, and he struggled less with that than I thought. The accuracy was okay.
And that's something that he's going to have to work on, especially the deep accuracy. They've been talking about, I've been playing clips of Luke talking about the deep accuracy in camp and how it's improved. But I thought, at least on one specific play, to see him, like Luke talked about, evade pressure, guy coming at his legs, he's getting hit, he's falling to the side, he still makes the throw with accuracy and velocity. I thought he wasn't great and perfect like all of the guys who we've talked about, because football is an imperfect game. But I thought J.J. McCarthy did check some boxes for me, and I'm a skeptic of McCarthy, admittedly.
Yeah, it was good to see him make some plays like that where pressure is falling at his feet. Quarterbacks hate that kind of pressure from the inside, and he made that completion. I liked seeing his mobility, getting outside the pocket. I think he'll be better this year than Sam Darnold, making plays outside of structure, and I think we know Kevin O'Connell can make pretty much anybody play well inside of structure. But I will say my issue, too, was with the accuracy, and specifically what I saw. The throwing motion, I don't know. I think the mechanics still are a work in progress where the throwing motion feels a little too elongated for me, where the ball just comes out, I feel like half a second to a second too late at times, and it's giving corners opportunities to close in. And I think that's been an issue with like Josh Allen early on in his career, kind of dealt with some mechanical issues like that. He had his throwing motion literally digitally mapped. I think eventually that could be something that's fixed, but that was my thing is Justin Fields has always had that issue, and he never fixed that. Cam Newton never really fixed that issue. McCarthy has one of those elongated throwing motions that I think was part of the problem with ball placement. So we'll see. That's more of a long-term fix, but overall, I didn't think it was a terrible first showing. And again, with Kevin O'Connell, again, his floor is naturally just going to be raised heading into basically a rookie year in year 2.
Yeah, he's in a great situation. That's always going to help get the best out of you and, again, raise your floor, like you're saying. But overall, I think it's fair to say it was a good debut, but it definitely wasn't perfect. And the thing is, McCarthy's going into year 2, technically, but really he is still a rookie. So it would be unfair to judge him more harshly than maybe some of these other real rookie quarterbacks who we're talking about, because in reality, it is his first kind of action. But a guy who has dealt with throwing mechanic issues, injury issues, isn't a rookie and is still performing up and down as Anthony Richardson. And our guys from Locked On Colts broke down their quarterback's debuts.
It's tough. You hate to see days like this from Anthony, though. I think just him being available today was a win in itself. But at the same time, they were in the red zone the entire day, and Daniel Jones looked really good, and Anthony did not. He was 1 of 6 today. Anthony was. His lone completion was like a 5-yard slant to Pierce. Meanwhile, Jones had like several touchdowns between 7-7s and 11-on-11s. Anthony did have some touchdowns when 7-7s got involved as well, but that's not what's going to be happening. I will say you're probably not going to ask Anthony to pass a ton in the red zone as is if you're in the regular season. But at the same time, you still have to pass that test and prove capable of doing it. So all that to say this is that I don't have a definitive way I'm leaning at this point. Honestly, I think Thursday probably made the waters a little more murkier for me.
I mean, after Anthony Richardson had kind of developed some momentum, seemed like he was pushing back to be the leader in the clubhouse to start, and then he goes out there, he has a rough performance and takes another injury. His pinky was literally bent sideways. It was dislocated. Doesn't seem like that's going to be a big deal. He was able to get back into some practice over the weekend, but it just seems like it never ends with Anthony Richardson. Yeah. When the games really matter, when the spotlight comes on, he just can't seem to play his best, and then he's always an injury risk. And the play he got injured on, which got broken down by all kinds of QB gurus and this and that, but I saw Kurt Warner, of course, former NFL MVP, he was even saying like, hey, Anthony Richardson didn't slide the protection to the right place and didn't notice it, and he ended up getting hit because of himself. And that's just stuff that in year 3 you would think would start to get better with Richardson, that you have to wonder if it is really getting better.
That's the thing, and I've been more of a defender for Anthony Richardson than most, but it's year 3 now. And again, he barely played football in college, and I thought it would be a work in progress. So again, I was more patient, but now watching him in that preseason game, hearing about what's going on in practice, it still feels like it's just not coming along. For a guy that's been in the league now for 3 years and it's gotten a lot of game action, it should be farther along. So I will never fault an organization for taking a prospect like this with this kind of upside. It just doesn't feel like it's working, though. And I do feel like, especially with Shane Steichen making sure he keeps his job long-term, I think they are going to go to Daniel Jones. I just think it's inevitable, and Richardson's game is just not efficient and consistent enough to be a starter right now. And I think you kind of just got to call a spade. And I'm kind of getting there myself. I haven't wanted to get there because I believed in Richardson's ceiling for sure. But, I kind of did the same thing with Will Levis's ceiling. And eventually you just got to call it. And I think you don't want to wait too long in the process. And I don't know. Watching that game and hearing about practice, it feels like it's probably time to move on sooner rather than later. And Daniel Jones is probably good enough to make them competitive this year.
it certainly feels like that if he doesn't improve at some point during the year, this year, that he won't get the opportunity that he got this year.
No, the leash is short.
Even if he's still on the team. But with that being said, that is going to do it for our kind of breakdown here of week 1 of the preseason in the NFL. Football games are back. We're going to continue the NFL conversation throughout the week here on Locked On NFL, but that's going to do it for us today. I am your host, the Madman Tyler Rowland, for my co-host, the Legacy Louis DiBiase. As we tell you every episode, thanks for tuning in, and stay safe out there.